Hello and welcome to the Vanguard of Light. I'm Fracka Future, and today we've got a really good one. So we're going to be talking about how to have empathy even for people that have hurt you. So you've probably heard about that before, but the really question comes down to how. I mean, especially when they've hurt you, you've got all of that anger. I mean, it probably was unfair, and it's like, well, oh yeah, just let it go. Just let it go. Don't have that pull you down. But the question is how. So we're going to introduce some things I like to call magical metaphors that help with that. We'll also talk a little bit more on the whys of it. But just some, I guess, start-offs or something like that. I don't know if you call it start-off, but it would be like, I'm not necessarily a fan of you don't necessarily want to give up that anger if you're still in that dysfunctional situation. I mean, anger is very generative. It's not a bad emotion, but it's a generative emotion for you to take action and get out of that situation. For whatever that anger to build up to then make the change that you need to make to change. I'm not saying use violence on the other person, but to use that anger to get out of that situation so you're no longer in it, because I don't recommend being in it, forgiving and doing all that, like forgiving, healing and stuff, while you're still in the situation, still getting harmed. That's not a good, that's a dysfunction, personally, I'm saying. So I say get out of the situation, get yourself safe, but then you want to clean up your mind, because if they're no longer can hurt you, but they're hurting you in your head, like you're just looping on it and you're mad about it and they did this to me and they hurt me and it's tearing you up inside, right? And you probably know this. You probably deeply know this of like, oh my gosh, this is tearing me up inside. How do I let it go? So I'm going to introduce these things I call magic metaphors. So I want you to think, we'll go into the whole concept of being a being of light. So you come in as this being of light, which is actually more figurative or it's more literal than figurative. Because you think about just the sun, right? The sun is light. I mean, it's basically light that's basically created life on. I mean, there's a spiritual side that created life, but the sun is basically fueling all the life on this planet. And it's the light that's fueling all the life, being of light. There's more to that, but just that of it's kind of literally a being of light. So you come in as a being light, but our purpose was to raise the darkness here. So whoever has hurt you came in as a pure being of light and raised the darkness to a certain level, but that level that they raised it to is the level that hurt you, right? So before they came in, it would have been a lot worse, right? So they actually lifted it up. So they've done a part, lifted up, but they didn't lift it up past that part to where it hurt you, right? So, and then kind of separating that was the darkness that they illuminated, and that was the behavior that then hurt you, not that being of light. So it's kind of if you had a room, right? And a lot of bad stuff was happening in that room, right? But it's completely dark. It's not like that bad stuff's not happening. And then someone happens to come in, open the door, and set a flashlight, and you start seeing all this stuff. It's kind of oh, well, look at those jerks with the flashlight that created all this darkness, all this bad things that are happening by shining their light. And it wouldn't be like that, because it'd be well, no, they're illuminating the darkness that's happened. So it's kind of taking that mind frame of the person that hurt you was actually illuminating that darkness. So it's the darkness that hurt you. It was the behaviors that hurt you, not necessarily their being. I mean, obviously you wish that they could have transformed it fully. We wish you all would have transformed it fully, and we came in that way. But it's kind of you can separate that of okay, wait a second. So being a light came in, highlighted the darkness, and that's what hurt you, is that darkness not being raised up. But we don't know how far down that darkness was and how much they raised it, so we can have empathy for them and forgiveness for them of okay, we don't know how much they raised. I mean, they might be a super saint and decided on this lifetime to take on some real horrible darkness, but what you experienced was that last little bit, and you can kind of see oh man, whew, they really went down deep. And it doesn't mean, and that's on a being level, on a spiritual level, to where you can clean up your mind, to where when you see them, you can just be hey, the being of them is the only thing I'll keep in my mind, and I'll keep it with love and light. But on a physical level, it doesn't mean you go back get back in a relationship with them or somehow have an interaction with them or open yourself up to that. It's none of that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the being level and what you keep in your mind and what you don't have torment in your mind. By using that metaphor, I'm like, okay, they lifted up the darkness. This is the being of them in my mind is going to be pure, and I'm going to resonate with that when I think on them, not that darkness that occurred. Because otherwise it's like that darkness is just getting more and more attacks. It's the purpose to raise it up. So it's kind of like it got raised up to this level. Now you got handed that darkness, right? But then mislabel it's that being, right? And it gets stuck there. As opposed to like, okay, no, here's the darkness at this level. How do you raise that up? And have that kind of let that go of like bring that darkness to light. See the being of light as a being of light. And you separate of like, hey, that's the behavior, that's the darkness. I don't want this to keep on tormenting me because that's the darkness winning, right? As opposed to you have forgiveness for the being and then you bring this darkness to light, then it's like you're disintegrating that. So hopefully that helps kind of, if you can separate that out and have that like kind of mind sanctum, so to speak, of like, okay, this is a being of light that was only able to raise the darkness, but we don't know how far down. It could have been an amazing effort to raise it to here. And this is the darkness that you confronted of what behavior they might have done. And it's like, okay, how do you come at that with love, light, and raise that up? Because if you can forgive that behavior, and it doesn't mean you get back with that person and see that person, okay, being a light raised it to here. One, it makes things a lot easier on you, especially mentally, but then it's also your chance to raise it up, to continue that raising the light up. And another reason to do that is because on a fundamental level, you're also a being of light, they're a being of light. So if you have hate to them, you're having hate to yourself. It can kind of links back to you because there's that purity of them and there's the purity of you. And it's like mislabeling of like, it wasn't the purity of them that hurt you. It was the purity of them that highlighted the darkness that they came into. And however far they were able to get it, it wasn't to perfection, which is the same as us. We're not to perfection. We're lifting our light up, the darkness up, and we're at a levels and we hurt people. But by separating that out of like, okay, this is the being of light, and I'll forgive and have empathy and love for that being. And then we address the darkness as separate. And then we are able to start separate ourselves from the darkness that we came into that feels like it's us. Oh, horrible. It's like, no, we're not. We're just confronting that darkness. We're going to raise it. And the more we get into our divinity and our light, the better we can raise it. And the better we get into that, we can have, empathy for them. So hopefully that helped. If it still feels very, very stuck, which is very possible, I have a course that's all about safety, so it might not feel safe to have that forgiveness, which is totally understandable, especially if you're either still in that situation or don't feel like you're fully protected, because sometimes we hold on anger of like, I'm not going to let you get back in my life, right? But that doesn't have to have anger to stop that from happening. So the course is a safety course. It's all about the fundamental core energetic chains that kind of inverted our beingness, that took us away from safety. It's free. So there's a link below. You can get the safety course and it will help unlock some of the energetic chains, which will also possibly help apply that metaphor and start seeing people as beings of light, separating their behaviors, which allows you to separate your behavior and see yourself as a being of light. So hopefully that helps. Until we talk again, have a blessed day or a blessed night. And also subscribe and like the video if you like the video. And until we talk again, have a blessed day or a blessed night.